We're going to paint this bear until he begs us to stop. He's for Mordheim, a game with somehow worse rules and balance than contemporary Warhammer games, but is somehow more fun. I'm priming it with a brush because when you spray with an airbrush or a rattle can, it can actually be a pain to get into the nooks and crannies. Once dried, I look at it from the bottom left and paint everything I can see with a blue, then paint everything else with a light khaki to get started. The specific blues and khakis don't matter as much as the tone or the brightness of the paint we're starting with. To get some initial depth and uniformity, adding a wash is optional, but in this case, I didn't dilute it quite enough. I did half and half dilution, but maybe a third or so would have been better. I'm saying this in hindsight as the soft brown tone ended up having a bit too much contrast with the base khaki layer after it dried, but you know, c'est la vie. From here I add some ochre and a spot of lemon white to start dialing up the white. The ochre is used there because the bear is being lit by the sun, you know, famously yellow. But if the light source was something else, I'd switch it up. Like if this was a corporate bear lit by overhead LEDs, I might add in a brighter blue tinge to paint. Look at his little bum. At this point, I'm still just using water. I'm not meticulously highlighting every fiber of hair. I'm taking large strokes, and although I am slightly watering the paint down, I'm still keeping it thick. We're not trying to glaze, we're trying to layer the bear. Normally, it's good tactics to paint your whites first and then glaze over them when possible, as it's harder to glaze with opaque paints, and it doesn't get much more opaque than white. Sometimes you can't always do that, so in this case we're just doing multiple incremental layers, adding a bit more lemon yellow to the paint after each pass. You can glaze with white, but I'll show you that later. When doing this incremental approach, it's like a stepladder of color, which is often not ideal because you can clearly see where each step of value starts and ends. However, with white specifically, our eyes can't really see those steps as well. They lack the accuracy and capacity. We have shit eyes for bad apes, so it ends up just working out fine. Once we finally start to reach the final stages of white to conquer, be still my lefty heart, it's time to switch over to flow aid instead of water because it's easier to paint accurate lines and slows down drying time. I say this in almost all of my videos, but I haven't seen it all over the internet yet. It is literally the largest skill up I have ever taken in this hobby with a single change. It gives me the tummy bubbles just to think that this hasn't taken off yet. I took a brighter, colder blue to highlight from below, like light bouncing off the snow, but you can't really see it and it did nothing, so I don't think I would do that again if I repainted this. Bored of the fur, I take a quick break to get paint on things that don't have paint because this fills my brain with good chemicals. I know the back plates are going to have a scooch of rust on them, so I use this copper brown from Vallejo, which my wife picked out because it looked pretty and it's like my favorite brown on the market now, so. The plate from above doesn't have as many nooks and crannies, so I start with a nice steel base and I'll paint in the manual rust later. Bored of the steel, I start on the red fabric and I get the idea to start with a deep purple because the Mephisto red paint I own was so old it separated into two distinct paints and one of them was purple. And I was like, whoa, that's the dark red. The base of the dark red is a purple, so I should underpaint in purple when I'm kind of a scientist, but I had no one to tell that to. She already puts up with so much of my shit. I can't be running down the hall to tell her about the scientific work in the fields of understanding the components of red paint. Gotta space that kind of stuff out. I appreciated the highlights with white before glazing on the red, but went a scooch heavy-handed, so I had to touch it up later. For the plate, I wanted it to look like it was reflecting the scene around it, but also that it was dinged up and covered in frost. That's the thing with metal. You can't just consider the color of the metal and what it's reflecting, but how it's reflecting it. So let's discuss that a bit. Steel is kind of a gray-blue, all right? And white is a natural highlight for that, okay? It's reflecting a lot of snow and ice, so the midtones will be kind of an ice blue, all right? That all makes sense. But the step people miss is you need to paint to the perceived texture of the object. So if this was a perfectly smooth surface like chrome, you would paint a one-to-one mirror of whatever it's reflecting in the world around the model, like mountains or something. If it was brushed steel, you could do a lot of little brush strokes in the same direction to simulate that, like the brushed steel surface. In this case, it's dinged up and diffused by frost, so I'm going to make it splotchy and blotchy. Why, yes, I did conveniently choose the easiest of everything I just mentioned to paint. What are you insinuating? The little pointy bits and edging don't have that much room to work with, and I'm not going into that much depth, so they get the regular old non-metallic metal treatment. Also, since I'm shading recesses of things with texture with a blue wash because it's steel, I use that same wash to paint the darker areas of the flat plates, because otherwise it'll look weirdly inconsistent if I go with another darker blue. The shadows should match. You'll notice I put some random splotches of brown into the steel. Even though I'm not really going for that much of a rusted look, I actually could have put another color to break up the steel in reflection, but it's important to put something. You could also paint in little scratches or dings and bumps. Look at people painting Warhammer. Even the clean and angelic future soldiers have a little wear and tear here and there. Life is, damaged. And your brain sends up an uncanny valley concern if it doesn't see it. I went with orange in this case because it pairs really well with blue and implies a little bit of rust. But it's bare armor after all. But some magenta or other complementary color also would have been a fine choice. It depends what you do with it, right? The back plating of the bear I decided to keep quite rusty because it would be hard to maintain the scales, I imagine, in real life. And I used the opportunity to poke and jab and dry brush at it with some metal base color to kind of dial down the rust a little bit. It's not supposed to look like Nurgle's armor plate. I also want to recognize how much I just jump around painting lately. I find I can paint for longer when I switch to something else every time I get a little bored. It soothes the brain meat. I also keep seeing things that make me angry, and like I'm trying to paint an armor plate, but I see something wrong, or the red arm wrap is borked, or there's a missing spot of paint, and my brain just starts screaming louder and louder and louder until I go fix it. And I'm actually the least OCD and ADHD person of my family, incomprehensibly. The fur finally started to spark joy again, so I went back to my shadow blue and added in the white from the standard lit area, highlighting it up, but always a step shy of the fur in the light, and only at the tips of the fur, not along the entire length of it. Lights bounce all over the place, so unless you're in a dark room with a projector being shot at you, chances are you're not just going to be light flesh with shadows in silhouette. It wasn't looking like a polar bear face, so I pulled up pictures of them and found out they actually have black noses and lips, which seems so obvious, but I can never remember this kind of stuff. I don't understand how artists draw things from memory. I can't even remember the color of bear lips. I don't know why. Should I know the color of bear lips? Is that a thing I should remember? Glazing black is easier than white, but glazing white over black is easier than vice versa. And I don't know if that's true, but that's my truth. It might just be the paints I'm using, I don't know. But you could, of course, go the other way. I just didn't. This is hella diluted paint at this point in any case. Like you can barely see the paint on the brush here. It's better to slow down and take your time. Watching this, I see so many little missed spots that I go back and touch up later, but when I'm actively painting, I always miss them. I have to hold models up to my face like I'm Mr. Magoo to see everything. The plate on the back of the bear kind of looked boring, so I just watched a video of the Shredder fighting Batman. And I thought the Foot Clan logo was pretty cool, but I already make a lot of kind of horny jokes on my shorts videos, and I didn't want anyone thinking I was Tarantinoing by painting a foot on its back. So I did a hand instead, which ended up looking more like the white hand of Saruman, but red, I guess? Which I think is fine. I sped through this because there's not much to do it. Freehanding, I think, is usually pretty easy the slower you go. I spend as much time sketching out like where the hand will be than I do actually painting in most of the paint of the hand. The PLA printed bases in snow were 100% an experiment. I haven't done snow bases in a while, and I wanted to see what I could do with what I have. This wave peak texture seems cool, but how often do you actually need something like that? So using it to fill in the gaps was perfect to kind of simulate compacted snow. I should have mixed these snow microbubbles into the Mod Podge or sprayed the area with diluted Mod Podge, but I think I was just in a manic mood. I'm including all of this, but I'm cringing as I watch the footage. Like, I'm just a big sticky baby. I don't know. Fuck. I don't know what I was thinking. It looks ridiculous. I'm getting stuff all over the place. Not working in something easy to clean up. Yeah. Anyway, but you know, I didn't screw it up. So apparently you can be a big sticky baby and it's fine. I did want it to look like there was actual ice, so I mixed snow sparkles that you normally dust onto the snow into some resin as well, and spread it over the gaps where there aren't snow, and then I hit it with the UV Death Star. It came out outrageously well, so I'm going to be doing that with all the bases. And it's like done. What a lovely little bear. Thanks to everyone irresponsible enough to give me your own money completely voluntarily, or cunning enough to give me someone else's. I'm going to say thanks to my mom, Hayes Gray, Julie, Alexander Burdett, Dave G, Pat, Gilgamesh Versus, David Sabata, Rogue Leader Echo, Ryan Arbiter, Papa Chicken, Providence, and recently we added Liam Clisham. Oh, and there's one more. There's a guy here named Aaron Reynolds. All right. Thanks, guys.